Hello, I'm Peter Giles, here to take you on a tour of the annual Crèche Exhibit hosted by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Palo Alto. Although hosted by the Mormon Church, there are many churches that have been included with their particular crèche displays. There are, in fact, over 300 crèche displays from over 40 different countries here in this annual exhibit. I'm standing here next to a crèche ball tree. Each one of these balls portrays a scene or a figure from the Nativity. Each ball is the result of a long, many-staged process. First is the careful lifting of the image from its former surface. Then it must be cut and fitted onto the curved shape. Then small pieces of the colored paper are fitted on. Finally, many layers of finishing materials and trim.
As we enter the chapel, we see the lovely gold, white, and dark green, and this is the crèche that greets you as you enter. This first crèche is a gift from St. Denis Parish in Menlo Park, who have loaned it to us for the exhibit.
This needlepoint crèche was handmade by the women of the Los Altos Methodist Church, especially for this exhibit. Crèches are very personal to their owners and are brought out each year lovingly to grace their homes. They are multifaceted and represent an art form, the Christmas story, a teaching with a religious focus, and perhaps a sentimental attachment to the time when the crèche was acquired. This is a crèche from the sea, a natural driftwood crèche with a story. The Ellsworth family of Palo Alto were vacationing at Patrick's Point Beach. One of them found Mary. Inspired, they hunted and soon found Joseph. After a long search, they finally found the perfect baby Jesus. The exhibit includes crèches done by folk artists such as these from the Jimenez Reservation in New Mexico. There are also some very sophisticated art objects created by some of the world's great artisans, such as this Meissen porcelain crèche made in Dresden, Germany. An example of traditional art is this finely detailed crèche exhibit from Lenox. We can feel the wonder and awe of that first Christmas in the faces of these figures from Oberammergau, Germany. These treasured pieces were hand-carved from Black Forest woods by Anton Fischer. This white stone crèche was made by stone artist Jacques Leloc in Belgium. In parts of the world, it has become traditional to bring the entire village into the presentation of the nativity scene, such as here at this crèche surrounded by a Mexican village, which is traditional in many homes in Mexico rather than a Christmas tree. It depicts everyone in the community bringing a gift to baby Jesus on Christmas. The children in the village do not receive their gifts until January 6th, thought to be the day on which the wise men arrive to present their gifts to the babe. This is a Tyrolean crèche from the Italian Alps near the border with Austria. The white towers of the Alps rise all around this high alpine town, known for its artist woodcarvers, mostly from the Moroder family. This creche was made by sculptor Arno Moroder in the studios of Gottfried Moroder and Cerna. For centuries, many members of the Moroder family have pursued their art, working mainly during the snowbound winter months. And here, a particular charming feature are two Tyrolean villagers looking in on that first Christmas Eve. This street scene of hand-carved figures from Switzerland was a gift longed for by Connie Benyon of Palo Alto during a 3-year period when her family lived in Switzerland. She had hinted to her husband that she would really like one, all the time thinking of some small display. David, wanting to please her, looked all over for the best creche and found this lovely display, which is hand-carved Swiss wood and covers about 4 feet of space. Connie was shocked when the gift was presented to her one Christmas morning in Switzerland. Inspiring us with the charm and diversity of its many figures is this hand-carved German village. This wonderful nativity scene was collected over many years and has been displayed for 25 years in Bell's bookstore in Palo Alto at Christmas time. Now it is featured as part of this creche exhibit. Each year, the U.S. Historical Society in Boston chooses one stained glass window from some place throughout the world, and the design is featured on a plate which can be lighted. 3 such plates are featured in the exhibit. Natural crystals created this Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus. This miniature creche, the tiniest of the exhibit, is framed in a walnut shell. The largest creche are these 5-foot-high figures from the Philippines made of conga grass. To preserve the color of the conga grass, it must be used immediately after harvesting. This creche exhibit from France's Provence region tells the story that the peasants of the village pass on as a folk tale, that Jesus was born in southern France, and that all the villagers, the little saints or santons as they are there, are on their way to visit the babe and take him gifts appropriate to their particular trade. Examples are the bread lady, the escargot seller, the man with bundles of sticks, the fisherman, the garlic lady, the chimney sweep who could also repair the roof, the knitter who was making a warm sweater or blanket for Jesus, the glass man to put window panes in the barn, and so on, with each person having his own special gift.
Hello, my name is Dean Harrison, and my husband Kurt and I lived in Marseille, France. This is the southern part of France, for 3 years, and we did a lot of interesting things. He was building a steel plant, and my job was to learn the language and get to know the people a little bit. And I found a delightful way that I could combine both of these. One was that I found that on one of the great traditions, on the 4th of December, the people of Marseille paraded down the main street of Cambière, which is the name of the main street, and they dressed as I am or any of these dolls, and at the bottom of the street they opened up little shops that were about 10 feet apart, and they sold these little dolls. And I was very curious about what these dolls had to do with Christmas. And at that time I hadn't seen many of the manger scenes, but just the little peasant people. And so I would stop and inquire from the little shopkeepers, and I was learning French, remember, so this was tough for them to try to communicate with me and tell me the story of the dolls. But as they struggled to do that, I became more and more entranced with the idea, and so I would learn the French and learn the stories about the dolls and buy one and come home. And I was spending the grocery money, so my husband asked me one day, as it was getting more and more prolific, "Aren't you a little old to be collecting dolls?" And I says, "Well, dear, these are my French classes. What can I say?" So he thought that that was a great way to learn the language. As the story all began in the city of Aubagne, that's a little east of Marseille, where there was a wood carver. And he used to just whittle out the dolls and make them to look like the people of the village and tell a story about them. And as he told the story about them, he would hand this to one of the children, and they'd run home and put it on their mantle, and that would become their prize keepsake. As it got nearer and nearer to Christmas, he said, "You all like stories and you like to pretend. Why don't we pretend that instead of the Savior being born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, why don't we pretend he was born right here in southern France in the city of Aubagne in the 1800s?" And the children thought this was delightful. And they said, "That would be wonderful. Then we could all bring gifts to the Savior." And he said, "What would you bring?" And they said, "Well, gold and frankincense and myrrh." And he says, "What does that mean?" They knew what gold was. They had no idea what frankincense and myrrh was. He said, "Well, in the 1800s, we've got other things. What could we bring?" And so one of the little children said, "I would bring bread because my mother and dad are bakers and they make cakes and breads and all this wonderful thing." Another one said her parents were fishermen, and so she would certainly bring fish because they were great fishermen. Another little girl said her mother raised flowers because the flowers were made for soap and perfume, and she could bring all three of those things. And it was delightful to hear how these children would use their imagination and think what they could bring, knowing full well that all these things that they would bring to their Christ child in the 1800s would be given to the poor people. So this wood carver said, "Well, we've got to have a definite day and time to do all this, so I'm going to appoint one of you little children to go up on the hill and announce when this baby is going to be born." And he is called the Réveillé, the little boy up by the lamp. And he raises his arms and he says, "He's here, he's here, he's here." And all the children and all the parents come and bring their gifts for the Christ child. One little girl had tears kind of in her eyes, and she said, "My mommy's very poor. She can't bring something. She's a wash lady." And the washwoman makes her own soap. She has her scrub brush, and she would scrub all the clothes for the new baby. And that one particularly tickles me because I think that's the beginning of the diaper service. There's another woman that I think is very charming, and she said the most valuable thing in her life was friendship, and she was going to bring her little child to be a friend to baby Jesus so that he would have someone to play with. So she was obviously going to let her child play with some lonely little child. The hunter was very important because you remember the story of Bye-Bye Bunting, Daddy's gone a-hunting to get a little rabbit skin to wrap the baby bunting in. Well, they could eat the meat and use the warm fur to make a little blanket or a cover. The man with the chair is very important because he said every picture that he ever sees of Joseph, he's been standing up all night. He said, "I'm going to make a chair for Joseph to sit on." His friend who sharpens the knives and has one of these big pumice stones, he said he's going to make new tools for Joseph for his carpentry shop. The shepherd is very important, and in the Bible you read so often about the shepherd and the sheep and tending the flock and going after the one when the 99 are safe. The importance of that is because with the nice warm wool coat that is on him, he can stay with the ewes while they're having their lambs, and all the shepherds in all these big countries do this. Because the lambs could be born two at a time or wander off and die or be very cold. So he picks up the little lambs when they're born, puts them under this cape. His body warmth keeps the lamb warm, and then the lamb keeps him warm. So it's kind of a reciprocal love affair there. And it's a very caring kind of thing, and this is one of the things that the Savior used as the care of the Good Shepherd. The children all loved the little chimney sweep. He reminds them of Bert from Mary Poppins. He said, "Well, I clean chimneys, but I don't really have anything I can give. And this little place where we've decided whether it's a grotto or a little house or a hut, how could I possibly do a service there?" And they said, "Bert, you're the bravest man in the village. You could go up on the roof and repair the tile or fix the holes. You've got a service that you could render, and that's even more important." The horse represents the Camargue area, or in the southern part of France, where they raise these horses to eat, along with beautiful flamingos that are there. And it's called cheval, if you happen to see that on the menu. They're very much like beef. They're not tough meat because they're just range horses. The one who rides the horse to look after them is called a guardian instead of a cowboy. And he happened to fall in love with the mayor's daughter. And you could tell that she was the mayor's daughter because she was finely dressed, and she also wore a little lace hat on her head to say that she was unmarried. The mayor thought that she could do better than marry a cowboy, but when he found how much she loved him, then he allowed them to do that. And as people were bringing gifts to Joseph, the story was told to me by a Frenchman this morning that the one who was receiving the offerings and the money actually gave the guardian some money for his honeymoon so that he could go off and marry the mayor's daughter. And I thought that was delightful. It became quite apparent that they couldn't make all the people of all the villages, so they decided to use just 2 people to represent every city in France. And because we were from Marseille, it became the fisherman and his wife, and they're called the Marseillaise. The bread people, as you know, they have bread in every village, in every little hamlet and city, so they could represent nearly any village in France. The bread lady is carrying one of the Christmas cakes, or love cakes, which is called the Gâteau de Noël. And if you happen to shop at the boulangerie any time between now and Christmas, they should have that. And it's a little sweetened bread dough with sugar sprinkled on top with the holes, and it's about 1 foot in diameter, and you just break pieces off and share that. And that was the cake that they especially made for the Christ child. The hunter you see here represents the Basque country. This is into the forest area. The 2 people you see over here are from the Basque country, and that's the wooded area. They bring in the sticks and the logs that are used for Yule logs and for cooking, and they certainly want to do what they can to bring their gifts also to the Savior and to the poor people. Now this man is just bringing water, and you know how important water is to our lives and to our country, to beautify it or to just survive with. So that's a very important thing that he can bring. The moulin, or the mill, is very important to the story because that's where Alphonse Daudet lived, and he is the very famous author and poet of children's literature in France. And they're still being published today, 200 years later. And he lived with the miller in his mill. And so that particular mill was called the Moulin de Daudet, named after him. This little fellow is called a vitrinier. He carries actual window glass on his back with all his tools to repair broken windows. And they said if this happened to be an old house or a shed, then he could certainly cover up those windows and make it nice and warm. Otherwise, he had tools and he could do many other services and repair work to make things comfortable. The man on the bench is reading a French newspaper, and he became one of the greatest teachers. And as you know, Christ himself was a great teacher, and they felt that education was so important, and he was always reading and studying and learning. And his gift was going to be able to teach the children and the adults whatever the need was there. His wife, who is knitting, is going to make blankets and shawls and clothing which are warm. And they sit and converse about the stories and waiting for the time when this Savior, this baby, is going to be born so that they'll have their gifts all ready to give. The little lady on the bridge is very busy knitting. Some people call her the gossip because she knits very fast, and as she knits, she talks about the people of the village. And she's very industrious in that she wants to make something also for the Christ child, but one of the things we're cautioned about is gossiping. And so they have to rebuke her from time to time to let her know that that's not what the Savior wanted. Particular scene here, I only have Mary, Joseph, and the baby, but the entire crèche exhibit has the wise men and the camels and the shepherds. But I wanted to emphasize the village people and their purpose in being a santon, or a little saint, in bringing and learning the message of the Savior. The baby is never put in the manger until Christmas Eve, and that's the beginning of the holy season. Mary and Joseph, of course, are represented here as little figurines, but the spirit of Mary and Joseph and Jesus are the ones that permeate the Bible so much and our scriptures throughout time. And I want the children to know, I still believe the story that Jesus was born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago and not in the 1800s in southern France. But this is just to make it a little more current, and even bringing it up till today, that each of us, because we love the Savior and we're trying to learn his teachings, to put them in a practical application in our daily lives so that we too can honor the Savior in this day and time.
We're now in the room that's set aside for the American folk art creches. This room probably has the most that is made by people that we know and love here in the ward and elsewhere in our town of Palo Alto. The ones we see here, there is a wonderful set of 4 hand-embroidered creches that Sue Allen has done. On the wall is a hand-painted and quilted creche by Colette Taylor, and just below that is a wonderful wood, very large wood set done by the sister of Kelly Bonham in our ward. This Mary and Joseph holding the baby is one of our better examples of using corn husks as a medium. This is a beautiful little needlepoint done by Leanne Giles. And just below that is one from Vera Kuhn. And these figures are all made on what used to be industrial thread spools. And continuing the spool theme, we have next to that one done by Shirley Campbell on small household thread spools. Up above that is a creche all made of various fabrics, but mostly felt, by Connie Benyon. This is a one that they've had in their family for years and years, and traditionally put it in a bag, and on Christmas Eve the members of the family pull out one figure and then tell the story of how that particular person or animal may have felt on Christmas Eve. This is the nativity set that has been hand-carved by Don Nielsen in the ward, and we discovered this a few years ago, and he's been kind enough to bring it to us. We encourage him to keep carving. This wonderful face belongs to Joseph, the way he is depicted by famous artist Tom Clark, who is known all over the country for his gnome figures. His studio is in Northern Carolina, where he's a resident professor of theology. His sculptures are very distinctive. He creates the material from which he makes these sculptures by mixing resin and crushed pecan.
The Crèche Exhibit is a Christmas gift to the entire community from the Palo Alto congregation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Come and join us at our meeting house on Middlefield Road in Palo Alto, just north of Charleston, and make this Crèche Exhibit a part of your Christmas season. And I wish you a very Merry Christmas.